Welcome back to a wicked historian.
Picture this. You are Marcus Flavius, a skilled stonemason from the hills outside Rome. You spent your life shaping marble for villas, temples, and tombs. It's honest work, respected work, but today, everything changes. A messenger arrives at your dusty workshop, his scroll bearing the unmistakable imperial seal. It's an order from Emperor Caligula himself. You're told your skills are required for a private project inside the imperial palace. The payment is staggering, more money than you've ever seen, enough to secure your family's future for generations. The work, however, comes with strict conditions. It's urgent, it's confidential, and once you accept, you will never speak of it again, to anyone, for any reason. You hesitate for a moment, the weight of that silence settling in. But the promise of such wealth is too great to refuse. You agree. As imperial guards escort you through the grand palace corridors, you feel a surge of pride. Very few craftsmen are ever summoned beyond the public halls. Fewer still are trusted with private renovations for the emperor. Whatever this project is, it must be of immense importance. But as you walk deeper and deeper into the palace, the atmosphere begins to change. The magnificent marble hallways grow quieter, almost unnervingly so. The bright Roman sun is replaced by the dim flicker of torches. Guards rotate more frequently, their faces stern and unreadable. Doors close behind you with a heavy thud, a finality you can feel in your chest. You realize, with a growing sense of unease, that these are not spaces meant to be seen by ordinary eyes. You are led into rooms that, at first glance, appear ordinary storage chambers, unused halls, forgotten wings of the vast palace. But the architectural plans you're handed tell a very different story. The renovations are unusual. Walls are to be thick and far beyond any structural necessity. Corridors are subtly redirected, creating confusing, maze-like passages. Rooms are designed with features you've never encountered before, clearly intended to isolate sound and sight. When you cautiously ask the palace administrator what these new spaces will be used for, he gives you a calm, rehearsed answer. These areas are for private imperial functions, nothing more. The tone makes it clear. Do not ask again. Over the following days, you work in a state of quiet diligence, but your mind is racing. You begin to notice unsettling patterns. The rooms you are building are positioned as far as possible from the public quarters of the palace. The entrances are cleverly concealed, hidden behind tapestries or disguised as solid walls. The few servants assigned to this wing never linger. They deliver materials and vanish without a word, and you hear hushed whispers among the other laborers. Some workers assigned to the most sensitive areas have disappeared entirely. One day they are working beside you, the next, they are gone, their tools left behind, their existence erased. Of course, all of Rome whispers about Caligula. Everyone has heard the stories. Some say he believes himself to be a living god, demanding to be worshipped. Others claim he delights in testing the loyalty of his court in bizarre and disturbing ways. Most people, yourself included, have always assumed the truth lies somewhere between outlandish rumor and political exaggeration. But now, standing inside these hidden chambers, a cold realization washes over you. Power doesn't always announce itself with trumpets and parades. Sometimes, it builds quietly, brick by brick, stone by stone, behind walls that no one is ever allowed to see. It's hard to remember now, but Caligula had not always been feared. When he became emperor at just 24 years old, the city of Rome celebrated wildly. He was the son of Germanicus, a beloved and heroic general, a young man raised in the shadow of greatness. For a brief, hopeful moment, the people believed the empire was entering a new golden age of peace and prosperity under his rule. Then, something shifted. Ancient historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio describe a rapid and terrifying transformation. An emperor who once seemed benevolent began to demand absolute, unquestioning devotion. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus began to understand that the imperial palace was a place of layers. There was the visible splendor, the shimmering marble and gold that dazzled Rome. And then, there was something else, something far darker, lurking just beneath the surface. The renovations continued, but under a level of supervision that bordered on paranoia. Every measurement was double-checked. Every single alteration required a specific, high-level approval. And always, the guards were there, watching silently as Marcus and the other craftsmen worked. They never explained, never reacted, their faces like stone masks. What started to trouble Marcus most wasn't what he could see, but what he couldn't. He realized with a growing unease that these new sections of the palace had no windows. There were no corridors that faced outward, no clear lines of sight to the city or the sky. There were no easy exits. These spaces were designed to be sealed inward, to turn your attention back onto yourself, onto whoever else was trapped in the room with you. The layout was deliberately confusing, creating a sense of disorientation. It was designed to strip away your sense of time. You could stand in one of these rooms for hours and have no idea if it was day or night outside. Palace officials would refer to it as enhancing privacy, but Marcus, a man who understood how structures shape human experience, recognized it as something else entirely, a cage. The other workers, veterans of the Emperor's many projects, would whisper when they thought no one was listening. Their words were chosen carefully, their language vague, as if they were afraid of even forming the wrong thought. They told Marcus this wasn't the first time. For years, Caligula had been quietly expanding these hidden, windowless sections of his palace. Each new project was more isolated, more deliberate, and more secretive than the last. The Emperor, they whispered, was obsessed with control. Not just control over his vast empire, but control over people themselves, their fear, their loyalty, and most importantly, their silence. And the palace, his home, had become the perfect instrument for exercising that control. Soon, Marcus began to notice who was being brought through these newly constructed corridors. They weren't common criminals. They weren't captured enemies of the state. They were members of Rome's most elite families. They were the sons and daughters of influential senators, popular generals, and wealthy merchants. They were individuals summoned to the palace under perfectly normal pretenses and invitation to serve, an offer of advanced education, a supposed imperial favor. But once they stepped inside those marble walls, they vanished from public life. Of course, official explanations were always ready. The public was told a family's son was on an extended tour of the provinces, or their daughter had joined a secluded religious order. Sometimes, they were given a prestigious political assignment abroad. And Rome, a city that was quickly learning not to ask dangerous questions, accepted these stories, because what made Caligula's system so chillingly effective wasn't just overt violence, it was complicity. Ancient historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio describe how Caligula delighted in blurring moral boundaries. He would force powerful senators to witness depraved acts, making them participants in their own debasement. In this twisted world, participation became a form of protection. Your silence became your key to survival. Marcus started to realize that these chambers weren't just built to contain people. They were designed to trap everyone connected to them in a web of silence and fear. The families couldn't speak out, because to admit their loved one was missing was to admit the emperor's displeasure, a fatal mistake. The entire system was built on the quiet, suffocating terror of what remained unsaid. As the renovations neared completion, the atmosphere in the palace grew heavier, more oppressive. Servants would scurry past, their eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding all eye contact. The once boastful Praetorian guards spoke only when spoken to, their voices clipped and low. Even the highest-ranking officials, men who commanded legions, moved through the halls with a visible, nervous tension. Everyone understood the unspoken rules. The emperor is always watching. And then, just as Marcus was putting the final touches on a section of inlaid tile, everything stopped. Abruptly, work was halted. The new chambers were sealed. Marcus and the other craftsmen were dismissed without a word of explanation. A stern-faced official paid them and warned them in a voice that was terrifyingly calm, that their work here was forgotten. They were never to speak of it, and they would never return. Months passed. Marcus tried to forget the windowless rooms and the silent corridors. He tried to unsee the faces of the young elites being led into the palace's hidden depths. Then, news tore through Rome like a wildfire. Emperor Caligula was dead, assassinated, stabbed to death in a palace passageway by members of his own Praetorian Guard. Publicly, the empire breathed a collective sigh of relief. The Senate quickly moved to condemn his memory. Officially, Caligula's shocking excesses were blamed on madness, his 4-year reign framed as a tragic but temporary anomaly in Rome's glorious history. Privately, however, the palace moved with ruthless speed. Rooms were sealed, records were burned. People who knew too much, who had seen too much, were quietly reassigned to distant, desolate posts, or they simply disappeared. The new regime, the new emperor, understood that the empire could not afford to truly examine what had happened behind those marble walls. The truth was too dangerous. Marcus never spoke of his work on the palace again. He lived a long life, but the knowledge of what he helped build followed him like a shadow. He knew that those chambers, those instruments of control, weren't destroyed, they were simply buried. And as history teaches us time and again, buried truths have a way of eventually resurfacing. Now, we're going to explore what happened in the chaotic aftermath of Caligula's death. We'll look at how the Roman elite scrambled to cover up the truth and why the chilling legacy of those hidden chambers, and the system of control they represented, still matters in our world today. What power leaves behind? After the Praetorian Guard assassinated Caligula in 41 AD, Rome stood at a precipice. The Senate, for a brief, hopeful moment, talked of restoring the Republic, but the Praetorians had other ideas. They found Caligula's uncle, Claudius, hiding behind a curtain and declared him the new emperor. The empire needed stability, and stability required a clean break from the past. So, a choice was made: expose the full truth of Caligula's reign and risk tearing the fragile empire apart, or erase it, sanitize it, and move forward as if the nightmare had never happened. They chose erasure. One of Emperor Claudius's first acts was to order the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill reorganized. This wasn't just spring cleaning, it was a systematic purge of memory. Official histories were commissioned, carefully softening the brutal edges of the previous 4 years. The most disturbing stories, the ones that painted Caligula not just as a flawed ruler, but as a monster, were dismissed as slander, as exaggerations cooked up by his political enemies. Damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory, was declared. His statues were pulled down, his name chiseled from public inscriptions. The goal was simple: make Rome forget, but some things refused to be forgotten. The accounts, though suppressed, survived. Decades, even centuries later, writers like Suetonius and Cassius Dio would document the reign of terror. They described an emperor obsessed with total domination, a man who saw human fear not as a failure of leadership, but as the ultimate proof of his own divine authority. He blurred the lines between God and man, demanding worship and treating the Roman elite as his personal playthings. He reportedly turned the palace into a stage for his cruelty, a place of perverse games and deadly whims. Now, modern historians are right to be cautious. They debate the accuracy of every lurid detail. Did he really try to make his horse a consul? Was the palace truly a labyrinth of debauchery and execution? These ancient authors were writing with an agenda, often to flatter the current dynasty by demonizing the previous one. But while individual stories might be exaggerated, the historians all agree on one central point: Caligula ruled through terror. He weaponized unpredictability, and terror, even when you try to bury it, always leaves traces. This is where the story moves from dusty texts to the dirt and stone of archaeology. For years, experts have studied the remains of the imperial palaces on the Palatine Hill, and they've found anomalies, unusual architectural features that don't quite fit the grand, ceremonial purpose of an emperor's home. Sealed corridors that lead nowhere, strangely reinforced walls in private wings. unexplained modifications that suggest certain areas of the palace served a purpose far darker than hosting banquets. Think of it like a crime scene. No single piece of evidence, no one sealed-off room, can definitively prove the most shocking stories told by Suetonius. But when you put all the pieces together, the strange layouts, the reinforced structures, the abrupt changes in construction, they form a pattern, a shadow. They point to something hidden, something that was deliberately concealed. The very act of sealing off these spaces tells its own story. You don't wall up a room because it was ordinary. You wall it up because it holds a memory you need to destroy. The physical structure of the palace itself seems to echo the official policy of erasure. But perhaps more important than the physical remains is the psychological scar Caligula's reign left on Roman society. Imagine being a senator or a wealthy merchant during those years. You learn, very quickly, that your power, your status, your family name offers you no real protection. The law itself becomes irrelevant when the man at the top is the source of all law, and his whims are your reality. The only currency that has any value is obedience. Absolute, unquestioning obedience. That lesson, that deep-seated trauma, outlived Caligula by generations. It seeped into the political DNA of the empire, a quiet understanding that at the heart of absolute power, the potential for absolute terror. What became of the people who enabled this terror, the ones who carried out the orders? Let's imagine a fictional but representative character, someone like Marcus Flavius, the master craftsman we talked about in a previous story, the one tasked with building Caligula's bizarre and cruel devices. After Caligula's death and Claudius's cleanup, Marcus disappears completely from the historical record. Did he live out his life quietly in some forgotten corner of the empire, haunted by what he had built? Or did he meet the same fate as so many others who knew too much, a loose end snipped by the new regime to ensure the past stayed buried? We'll never know, but his story represents a much larger, more uncomfortable truth. Most systems of cruelty aren't maintained by a single monster. They are propped up by ordinary people, craftsmen, administrators, guards, servants, people making small, seemingly insignificant compromises under immense pressure. I was just following orders. If I didn't do it, someone else would have. I was just trying to protect my family. Each small compromise, each brick laid in the wall of a secret chamber, contributes to the whole. Caligula didn't invent terror. He was just a master at organizing it. He understood how to turn the very structure of authority into a hostile environment, a place where fear replaced law, and silence replaced justice. And that is why his story still matters today, 2,000 years later. Because history is not just about what happened, it's about what people allowed to happen. It's a study in how quickly norms can collapse when power goes unchecked. The marble halls of the imperial palace are quiet now. The secret chambers, if they ever existed, lie buried beneath centuries of rebuilding, lost to time. But the lesson remains, etched not in stone, but in the memory of what happened there. Unchecked authority doesn't need iron chains to enslave people. It builds walls instead, walls of fear, walls of silence, and it always finds people willing or forced to help lay the bricks. If you want to explore more of these hidden chapters of history, the stories buried not because they were unimportant, but because they were inconvenient, there's another video waiting for you on screen right now. Make sure you subscribe to A Wicked Historian and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next dive into the dark corners of the past. And let me know in the comments what piece of hidden history you want me to uncover next. Thanks for watching.